Hey everybody, it's Tori, the Grubby Pirate, and it's Sunday, May 24th. Today I'm going to talk a bit about the namesake of our resort. I get asked this quite a bit, whether it's online here or whether it's guests coming to our resort. It's something that intrigues a lot of people, and I thought I'd share the story with you. Now, if you've been involved or interested in the sport of surfing, then you probably know the name Mike Boyum. Whether you have or you haven't, it's time to introduce you to one of the most interesting and one of the most influential people in the history of the sport. Unfortunately, there's just not enough time here to talk about the full 43 years of Mike's life. But hopefully we can sneak in a few minutes to do him justice. So who was Mike Boyum? Mike was obviously a surfer, but first and foremost, he was a son, a brother, and a friend to a lot of people. And unfortunately, Mike was at a sad point in his life at the end. And there are a lot of stories about Mike's life, and especially rumors and stories surrounding the end of it. But I'm not here to talk about any of that. I'm here to tell you about my friend Mike Boyum. So who was Mike Boyum? Well, Mike wasn't one of the greatest surfers in the world, but he was a very good surfer. And he hung out with some of the best surfers in the world. But Mike's claim to fame was the ability to discover surf. And it can be arguably said that Mike is responsible for discovering some of the leading surf destinations in the world today. But without a doubt, Mike can take claim for establishing the first ever surf camp anywhere in the world, where in 1972, Mike started G-Land, Garage Again. And if you're a true surfer, you know G-Land. If not, time to go back to school. G-Land was a long time ago though, and a long ways away from Siargao. But Siargao is where Mike ended up. Unfortunately, it's also where Mike passed away in June of 1988. And while Mike may not have been the first surfer on Siargao, he was definitely the most notorious. And there's no doubt that Siargao would have been discovered eventually, but it was Mike's death that brought all the surfing magazines, who planted the seed and put the island on the map. My story on Siargao began 4 years ago when my wife Apple Jane and I came to Siargao to locate Mike's unmarked grave. And while I was here, I met the only two people that really knew Mike during his brief stay on Siargao, Mayor Jaime Resilian and Pastor Modesto Mozo. Unfortunately, Mayor Resilian passed away about a year ago, but Pastor Mozo is still on the island and actually wed Apple Jane and I this September. And with the assistance of these two fine gentlemen, I was able to get the true story of Mike's stay here on Siargao. Pastor Mozo actually mentioned to me that he met Mike in Siargao and brought him to the island. And Mayor Resilian, he told me that he met Mike that same day after Pastor Mozo dropped Mike off at the boulevard in General Luna. He said he remembers it like it was yesterday when this shaggy white guy walked up to him, a couple of surfboards under his arms, dropped them off, and asked if he would watch them while he swam out to that island. Well, that island happened to be Daku Island, and Mayor Resilian has said to this day that he's never seen anybody swim out to Daku Island. And after his swim back, Mayor Resilian said that Mike politely mentioned to him that you have a beautiful town. Would you mind if I stayed? Mayor Resilian replied, you can stay for the rest of your life if you'd like. And that was in December of 1987. Unfortunately, the rest of Mike's life was only until June of 1988. It was a short 7 months on Siargao. But while his time was brief on Siargao, his footprints are still here today. As I mentioned earlier though, Mike's life at this point was at a dark spot psychologically. And even during his time on Siargao, he actually lived under an alias as Max Walker. And it wasn't until after Mike's death that Jaime Resilian discovered Mike's true identity, after discovering Mike's identification in his belongings. Max Walker, a fictional comic book character. A character who even Mayor Resilian said he loved as a kid. There's a lot of irony to this story, and there's a lot more to come. So getting to the point, Mike died of starvation on June 14th, 1988. June 14th, 1988, the 43rd day of Mike's self-imposed hunger fast. And the irony of it all, again I mentioned there's irony, Mike's 43rd birthday. And the view that you see from the beginning of this clip is the exact spot that Mike had overlooking what is today Cloud 9. And the church monument that you see today is literally only steps away from where Mike was camped and where he passed. What brought Mike to this spot is as interesting as anything else in the story. But you're probably wondering, Why was a guy even fasting for 43 days? But you have to remember that Mike was at a bad point in his life, and fasting was not unusual to him, even fasting for 40 days. But Mike wasn't planning on fasting past 41. Mike had fasted for 40 days several times during his life, and his plan this time was just to beat his record. But due to unforeseen circumstances and the fact that a major typhoon came in and Pastor Mozo was unable to get back to Mike and nourish him back to health, Mike passed on the 43rd day. And at that time, there was nobody living for miles and miles in either direction of Tawasin Point to help Mike out. But that was Mike's reason for choosing that location. Both Pastor Mozo and Mayor Resilien have mentioned to me that Mike actually started his fast in General Luna. But people are just too hospitable. Filipinos will not let anybody go hungry, and they just wouldn't let Mike fast. But Mike asked, and they recommended that there was one spot on the island he could go that nobody would bother him. It was a spot that at the time was considered haunted and very spiritual. So both Pastor Mozo and Mayor Resilien mentioned that location near Tawasin Point. And if you've ever been there, well, you know nobody's afraid of the boogeyman anymore. It's funny what money will do, isn't it? But hey, I'm a capitalist, and I'm not afraid of the boogeyman either. After spending the 3 days that I did trying to locate Mike's grave, well, I actually fell in love with the island of Siargao as well. And if you've been here, you'll see how easy it is. And after spending only 3 short days, Applejane and I both decided we wanted to relocate to Siargao. So we moved immediately from what was the birthplace of surfing in the Philippines, Balir Aurora, on the island of Luzon, north of Manila, where we were already operating a very successful resto bar. And we had no idea that it was going to take over a year to discover our calling here. But we finally lucked out and discovered what is today Boyum's Surf Camp and Resort. And during that 1 year, there was only one thing on this island that really bothered me, and that was that there was no mention of Mike Boyum, other than a brief blurb on a website of Buddha's Surf Camp and Resort. And it's no wonder they're the second best resort on the island. They know the history of surfing. The minute we secured the lease on our property, I knew I wanted to call the resort Boyum Surf Camp and Resort. And I immediately contacted Mike's brother Bill to see if he and his sister Mimi would be cool with the idea. And Bill contacted me within 24 hours to let me know that he and Mimi thought it would be a great idea and that Mike would have loved it. But there was still one hurdle to leap before we could officially name the resort. And that hurdle was the fact that I really didn't know Mike that well, and I needed to know whether Mike was really a good guy before we were going to name a resort after him. And while I didn't know Mike as well as a lot of other people, a very, very, very good friend of mine knew Mike probably better than anybody else. And that friend is Gerry Lopez. Yes, that Gerry Lopez. Arguably the greatest surfer in the history of the world, but without a doubt, Mike Boyum's best friend. And since I would soon have to travel to Gerry's home in Oregon to pick up a surfboard that he had been shaping for Applejane's wedding present, I thought I would surprise him with a little question about Mike. And I made sure not to mention any plans I had for Siargao to Gerry before I got to his house. Well, the first thing Gerry and I always do when we see each other for the first time in a long time is just go for a little walk to catch up. We never even made it to the end of the driveway before I changed the subject to Mike. And I said to Gerry, Gerry, you've got to tell me a little bit about Mike. Well, he just stood there looking at me pretty funny. But he just said, what do you want to know? What do you want to know about Mike? And I can honestly say I saw something physically change about Gerry when I asked him that question, when I stood in front of him and asked him about Mike Boyum. I just pointedly asked Gerry, I just really need to know whether Mike was a good guy or not. And without hesitation, Gerry simply stated right away, Mike was the greatest guy in the world, and that there wasn't a day that went by that he never thought about him, and that he was genuinely the nicest person in the world. And then he asked me why I needed to know about Mike now. And that's when I mentioned I leased land on Siargao and was starting a surf camp. And before I said anything else, he said it has to be called Boyum's. And Boyum's it is. And today, this is where Mike lies, about 20 meters to the left of that cross at the cemetery in General Luna. And this is Mike's view. Unfortunately, we weren't able to mark Mike's grave because he was buried in an unmarked grave. Rest in peace, Mike. You're missed, loved, and thought about every day. We weren't able to mark your actual gravesite, Mike, but you know what? We were able to do a little something just 100 meters down the beach. We've got you a spanky memorial stone. And a pretty damn nice namesake, if we do say so ourselves. We hope you like it, Mike. We definitely think it's your kind of place. Bill, Mimi, and Gerry, thanks for all of your support. We really appreciate it. And to everyone else, thanks for watching the video. We really hope you enjoyed it. And if you're planning a trip to Siargao or have any questions about the island, please don't hesitate. And yeah, the story's pretty much over, but we're just doing a little walkabout. There's Brown Man Surf, our surfboard shop, and we're just walking right to the edge of the resort from one end to the other. Cruising right along. We are still in quarantine. We've been there, almost 3 months now. Hopefully we're opening up June 1. That's the game plan, I think, anyway, but things do change. That's my dog, CR, one of our dogs. Oh, every place in the Philippines has 20 dogs. There's one of ours. CR, walking right down the middle of the road, could care less. Can't believe he's 11 years old and made it this long here. And there it is, everybody. Boyum Surf Camp and Resort. And you've made it this far. We hope you'll do us a favor, throw us a bone, and subscribe. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.